What is drag? One might as soon ask, how long is a piece of tucking tape? Because the question is something of a head-scratcher. The pursuit of a definition has destroyed friendships, snatched wigs, befuddled academics, and revoked liquor licenses. The truth is that nobody seems quite sure. The disagreements begin with the origin of the term. There are those who declare loudly from overdrawn lips that it refers to long skirts dragging along the theatre floor, while others throw down their purses in disdain at this claim and insist the term is an acronym for dressed as a girl, which sort of works if you squint a bit. A lesser-known theory supposes that the term has its origins in a slur for effeminate gay soldiers who would drag behind formation to chatter and fornicate. We can't possibly know if there is any truth to this, but we can dare to imagine that the gossip was juiciest at the rear. Like art, drag evades definition. Art cannot be exhaustively summarised as oil on canvas, but we generally accept that an earthworm or a Tuesday is not art. Similarly, we cannot define drag exclusively as somebody dressed as a girl, but we can assume that the New York Stock Exchange is probably not drag. At least, we hope not. What does exist is a canon of sorts, a series of references, motifs, and traditions woven together in large part by queer history and gender nonconformity. Common themes are queer self-expression, the subversion of societally acceptable gender norms, and parody of the heteronormative, straight, world. Drag's potential applications are no less varied. A person may call upon the magic of drag to create a comic portrayal of the opposite sex. They may utilise drag to manifest a stylised version of their most authentic self. They may use drag to reject binary gender altogether. Any gender can participate in drag, and any gender can be performed as drag. Drag can refer to the costume worn for a performance or to a performance itself. The possibilities are endless and counting. It is worth noting that gay men dominate the written history of drag, but to define drag simply as men dressing in feminine attire would be a brutal injustice to the art and its myriad participants. Cisgender men are central to most written history, and the world of drag is no exception. Patriarchy, it seems, pervades even queer subculture. Furthermore, trans and non-binary artists have been founders in creating the language, aesthetic, and social structures of the drag style popular in today's mainstream. Much of the lingo made famous by RuPaul's Drag Race owes a debt to the ballroom scene, and trans kings and queens are still major players in the landscape of drag, despite being underrepresented on our TV screens. So, what is drag? For the sake of argument, I humbly proffer the following. Drag is a form of creative self-expression that uses costume, makeup, and/or performance to play with traditional notions of gender. Where society has said, this is a man and this is a woman, drag has stuck out its tongue and brazenly answered, no. However you prefer to define it, people have been slipping into each other's knickers and making a scene since time immemorial. We have no way of knowing who first donned the wrong loincloth. All we can do is pinpoint a few of the sparkling peaks and embarrassing stumbles in history and wonder with bated breath where drag is going next. I, for one, am on tenterhooks. The evolution of drag. Where drag began. Queer culture has long been tied to the history of the theatre. In Shakespeare's London, women were not permitted on stage, and so men wore female attire to play female roles. And we can imagine that many of these performances were delivered with a knowing flourish and flair. However, female impersonation existed here as a specialist skill that evolved in response to the cultural exclusion of women. It was a practical subversion rather than a deliberate political transgression. Women finally made it onto the European stage in the 17th century, and by the 18th century, female sopranos were frequently cast in breeches roles, as adolescent boys in Italian operas. By this time, the majority of men who played female roles did so for comic relief. The tropes of the lead boy and pantomime dame have persisted to the present day. Beneath the veneer of popular entertainment were the molly houses of 18th century England, illicit meeting places for gay men where cross-dressing was rife, and mock weddings and even births were performed. Though often raided, arrested, and persecuted, the homosexuals and effeminates would continue to meet in such a manner well into the Victorian period. Meanwhile, in America, the first person to describe themselves as a queen of drag appears to be African-American William Dorsey Swann, a former slave and gay liberation activist. Swann threw elaborate drag balls for black queers in 1880s Washington, D.C., and campaigned for the right of his community to gather without persecution. His soirees are arguably the origin of the modern ballroom scene. Female impersonation as commercial entertainment saw a boom in the vaudeville tradition of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, making a particular star of American actor Julian Eltinge. However, negative associations with homosexuality and sex work led to the decline of the tradition during the anti-corruption crackdowns of the Progressive era. Drag would later resurface as an underground art form during the Prohibition era, a phenomenon known as the pansy craze. By the early to mid-20th century, drag was almost exclusively associated with gay nightlife culture, and therefore criminal deviancy. Under the cover of darkness, in houses of ill repute on the wrong sides of the wrong towns, queer people met to express themselves and challenge the boundaries of gender. It was here that modern drag started to take shape.